The salt spray stung Ilara's face like 1,000 tiny daggers as her ship, the Black Sparrow, sliced through the moonless Caribbean night. At 22, she was the youngest pirate captain to ever command these waters, her name whispered in fear from Tortuga to Barbados. But tonight, her heart pounded not with the thrill of plunder, but with a gnawing unease that clung to her like damp rot. The coastal town of San Viradú lay ahead, its lanterns flickering like fireflies against the black horizon, ripe for a raid. Her crew of 30, hardened by years of storms and steel, readied cannons and cutlasses, their laughter coarse as the creaking timbers beneath their boots. Ilara gripped the helm, her calloused hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. Something felt wrong. Not the raids were her lifeblood, but something deeper, a warning carried on the salt-heavy wind. San Viradú was no fortress. Its crumbling walls and sleepy guards made it an easy mark for a crew as ruthless as hers. The plan was simple: storm the docks, seize the governor's gold and vanish before dawn. But as the Black Sparrow anchored in the shadow of a cove, Ilara's sharp green eyes caught a flicker of movement on the shore. Not soldiers. Not townsfolk. A lone figure, hunched and staggering, moving toward the water's edge like a man pursued by death itself. In the dim glow of a distant lantern, she saw him, an old man, white hair tangled like sea foam, his coat torn and bloodied. He collapsed against a piling, one hand clutching his side, the other reaching desperately for a skiff bobbing in the tide. Ilara's first instinct was to ignore him. Pirates didn't play nursemaid to strangers, especially not during a raid when every second could mean a noose around your neck. Her crew was already piling into longboats, blades glinting like shark teeth in the starlight. But those eyes, dark, hollow and pleading, locked onto hers across the water, and something in them hit her like a cannonball to the gut. She'd seen that look before years ago in the mirror, when she was a starving orphan running from men who'd called her property. The memory burned, sharp and unwelcome. "Captain," hissed her first mate, Tobin, a scarred brute with a voice like gravel. "We're losing the tide. What's the hold-up?" His hand rested on his cutlass, his glare saying what his words didn't. A captain who hesitated wasn't a captain for long. Ilara's crew was loyal, but loyalty among pirates was as fragile as sea glass. One wrong move, and they'd carve her out of command faster than a shark could smell blood. She opened her mouth to bark the order to row, but the old man's hand slipped from the piling, and he slumped into the surf, his body half submerged. The tide lapped at his wounds and a faint groan carried across the waves. Every rule of the sea screamed at her to leave him. He was nobody. A liability. A risk that could sink her ship in her name. But as she watched the water turn dark with his blood, Ilara felt something shift inside her, like a compass needle swinging toward true north. She thought of her father, lost to these same seas, and the stories he'd told her of honor among thieves. She thought of the men who'd hunted her as a child, and how no one had stopped to help. She thought of the safe thing, the smart thing, and then she made the decision that would change everything. "Tobin," she said, her voice low but iron firm, "get to the town. Take the gold. I'll catch up." His eyes narrowed, suspicion curling his lip. "And you, Captain? Gonna knit a blanket for that old wreck?" The crew chuckled, but Ilara's glare silenced them like a squall scattering gulls. "Do as I say or I'll cut your tongue out and feed it to the crabs." Tobin spat into the sea but nodded, signaling the longboats to move. Ilara moved alone, her boots silent on the wet sand as she reached the old man. Up close, he was even frilier than she'd thought, his skin pale as sailcloth, his breathing ragged as a torn mainsail. Blood seeped from a gash in his side, and his hands trembled as they clutched a leather satchel, small but heavy as if it held the weight of his life. "Please," he whispered, his voice cracked like old timber. "They're coming, hide me." His words were English but the accent was strange, Spanish maybe or something older from ports she'd never sailed. "Who's coming?" Ilara asked, her hand on her dagger, her eyes scanning the darkened shore. The raid had begun, shouts and the clang of steel echoed from the town, but something else pricked her senses, a distant rumble like hoofbeats or boots on cobblestone. The old man's eyes widened, fear replacing pain. "Men, with muskets. They want what I carry." He clutched the satchel tighter and Ilara's pirate instincts flared. Whatever was in that bag, it was worth dying for, and maybe worth killing for. She should have left him. Should have pried the satchel from his weakening grip and let the tide take him. That's what a pirate captain did, took what she could and left the rest to the sea. But those eyes, that desperate plea, they clawed at the part of her she'd buried deep, the part that still believed in mercy even in a world that rewarded none. "Can you walk?" she asked, already sliding an arm under his shoulder. He nodded weakly and she half-dragged, half-carried him toward her skiff, his weight light but his breathing heavy, each step a gamble against time. The Black Sparrow loomed in the cove, its black sails blending with the night. Getting him aboard unseen would be a miracle. Her crew was loyal to gold, not to her, and hiding a stranger during a raid was the kind of madness that sparked mutiny. As she rowed him toward the ship, the sounds of the raid grew louder, screams, shattering glass, the boom of a cannon. But another sound was rising, closer now, unmistakable, the clatter of boots and the bark of orders from the shore. Whoever was hunting this old man, they were faster than she'd expected, and they were coming straight for her. Ilara's mind raced as she hauled the old man onto the deck, his blood leaving a slick trail on the weathered planks. The crew was still ashore but they'd return soon, and if they found him, questions would turn to accusations. She dragged him below, into the cramped hold where barrels of rum and stolen silks were stacked like a thief's hoard. A loose panel behind a crate led to a smuggler's nook, barely big enough for a man. "Stay quiet," she hissed, shoving him inside. "One sound and you're shark bait." He nodded, clutching his satchel, his eyes holding something more than gratitude, something that looked like knowing, as if he'd expected her to save him. As she sealed the panel, the shouts from the shore grew sharper and torchlight flickered across the water. Her crew's longboats were returning, laden with gold, but so were the pursuers, soldiers maybe, or worse, rival pirates. Ilara's blood turned to ice as she realized the truth. By hiding this old man, she hadn't just saved a life. She'd invited a storm aboard her ship, one that could drown them all. The deck creaked under her boots as she climbed back to the helm, her heart pounding like a war drum. What had she done? And what was in that satchel that men would kill for? The Black Sparrow groaned under the weight of the night, its timbers creaking like the bones of some ancient beast as it carved through the inky Caribbean waves. Ilara stood in the hold, the air thick with the scent of rum and damp wood, her lantern casting jagged shadows across the smuggler's nook where she'd hidden the old man. His name, he'd whispered, was Diego, and his sunken eyes held secrets that made her skin prickle like a storm was brewing inside her. The raid on San Veradu had been a success. Sacks of gold and silver now weighed down the longboats, but Ilara's triumph tasted like ash. Hiding Diego was a gamble that could cost her everything. Her crew, her ship, her name. The lantern's flame flickered as if it too knew the danger she'd invited aboard. Above deck, the crew's laughter and clinking coins echoed through the planks, but down here, it was just Ilara, Diego, and the suffocating silence of her decision. She knelt beside the nook, her dagger resting lightly in her hand, not a threat but a reminder. "Who are you, old man?" she whispered, her voice sharp as cutlass steel. "And what's in that satchel that's worth dying for?" Diego's breath rattled like loose rigging, his bloodied coat clinging to his frail frame. He clutched the leather satchel closer, its edges worn but its clasp gleaming with purpose. "Not yet, Nina," he rasped, his Spanish accent thick as molasses. "Trust is a coin you don't spend lightly." His words stung not because they were cruel but because they were true. Trust was a luxury Ilara hadn't afforded since she was a girl, running from men who'd chained her dreams to their greed. Her green eyes narrowed, searching his face for lies. The gash in his side oozed slowly now, bandaged with strips torn from her own shirt, but his strength was fading like a tide going out. "You've got 1 minute to give me a reason not to toss you overboard," she said, though her voice wavered. She wasn't sure if she meant it. Diego's lips cracked into a faint smile, not mocking but knowing, like he'd seen her kind of defiance before. "You remind me of someone," he said, his gaze distant, as if staring through the ship's hull to a memory long drowned. "A girl with fire in her eyes, who sailed these seas before you were born. Your mother, perhaps?" Ilara's heart stopped, the lantern trembling in her grip. Her mother was a ghost, a name whispered in her father's stories before he too vanished into the deep. "Don't play games with me," she snapped, but her voice cracked like a snapping spar. "My mother's dead. Been dead for 20 years. Diego's eyes softened and he reached out, his trembling hand hovering near hers. "Maybe Nina. Maybe not. But I knew a woman named Mariana, with eyes like yours and a heart that defied storms." The name hit Ilara like a cannon shot. Mariana. Her mother's name, buried so deep in her memory it felt like a wound reopening. How could he know? Was it a trick, a desperate ploy to stay alive? Before she could press him, heavy boots thudded above, and Tobin's gravelly voice cut through the hold like a blade. "Captain, where the devil are you?" The crew was back, their plunder stowed, their spirits high on gold and grog. But Tobin's tone carried an edge sharper than usual, a suspicion that could ignite mutiny faster than a spark in the powder room. Ilara's pulse raced like a ship in full sail. If they found Diego, they'd see a liability, not a man. Pirates didn't shelter strays, they gutted them and took their secrets. She shoved the lantern behind a barrel, plunging the nook into shadow. "Stay quiet or we're both dead," she hissed, sealing the panel with a crate. Diego's eyes held hers, that knowing look burning brighter now, as if he trusted her more than she trusted herself. She climbed to the deck, the night air cold and biting, the stars hidden behind clouds that promised a storm. Tobin stood by the mainmast, his scarred face lit by the glow of a pipe, his eyes boring into her like grapeshot. "You were gone during the raid, Captain," he said, the word captain dripping with challenge. "Crew's wondering what kept you. Found something worth more than gold." The men behind him, Black Jack, One Eye and the rest, shifted, hands resting on cutlasses, their laughter gone. Ilara felt the deck tilt beneath her, not from waves but from the weight of their stares. She was their captain, but only as long as they believed in her. One whisper of betrayal and she'd be swinging from the yardarm. "Just checking the hold," she said, her voice steady as a keel. "Making sure our hull's secure." Tobin spat into the sea, his eyes never leaving hers. "Funny thing, Captain. I thought I heard voices down there. Sounded like you were talking to someone." The accusation hung in the air like cannon smoke, and Ilara's hand itched to draw her dagger. She could lie, but Tobin's nose for deceit was sharper than a shark's. "You calling me a liar, Tobin?" she said, stepping closer, her voice low and dangerous. "Because the last man who did that's feeding fish off Nassau." The crew tensed, but no one moved. Tobin held her gaze, then shrugged, his smile cold as a winter squall. "Just looking out for the crew, Captain. We don't like secrets." The ship lurched as a wave hit, and from the horizon came a rumble, not thunder but something worse. Ilara's eyes snapped to the darkness beyond the stern. Lights flickered, distant but growing closer. Ships. At least two, their sails catching the faint moonlight as they bore down on the Black Sparrow. Her crew saw them too, their suspicion of her forgotten as they scrambled to their stations. "Spanish Navy?" Black Jack muttered, grabbing a spyglass. "Or worse," One Eye growled. "Bloody Calico Jack's men, come to steal our take." Ilara's blood turned to ice. The pursuers Diego had warned her about weren't just soldiers. They could be rivals, mercenaries, or worse, men sent by someone who knew what Diego carried. She barked orders, her voice cutting through the rising panic. "Full sail. Head for the reefs." The crew obeyed, but Tobin lingered, his eyes flicking to the hold. "If there's something you're not telling us, Captain, it better not sink this ship." Ilara ignored him, her mind racing like a storm-driven gale. Diego's words echoed, Mariana with eyes like yours, star. Was he a liar, a madman, or something more dangerous? And what was in that satchel that could tie him to her past? The ships behind them were gaining, their lanterns like the eyes of predators in the night. The Black Sparrow sliced through the Caribbean dawn like a blade through silk, its sails taut against a wind that howled like a banshee. Ilara clung to the helm, her knuckles white as seafoam, her green eyes scanning the horizon where two enemy ships loomed closer, their cannons glinting like the teeth of a waking beast. The reefs were near, treacherous shallows that could gut a ship as easily as a cutlass, but Ilara's mind wasn't on the chase. It was below deck, in the smuggler's nook, where Diego, the old man she'd risked everything to hide, clutched a secret that could either save them or doom them all. The crew's suspicion hung heavier than the storm clouds gathering overhead, and Tobin's accusing stare burned into her like a brand. One day after the raid on San Verdu, Ilara was about to learn why some secrets were worth killing for. In the hold, the air was thick with the stench of salt and blood. Ilara crouched beside Diego, her lantern casting a sickly glow across his gaunt face. His breathing was shallow, each gasp a reminder that time was slipping away like sand through a cracked hourglass. "No more games, old man," she said, her voice sharp as a reef's edge. "Those ships are gaining, my crew's whispering mutiny, and you're still playing coy. What's in that satchel?" Diego's eyes, dark as the deep sea, met hers with a weight that made her chest tighten. Slowly, with hands trembling like sails in a squall, he unclasped the leather satchel and pulled out a rolled parchment, its edges yellowed and stained with what might have been blood or brine. "This, Nina," he whispered, "is why they hunt me. And why they'll hunt you now." Ilara unrolled the parchment, her breath catching as she saw it. A map, drawn in faded ink, its lines twisting like the tentacles of a kraken. Islands she'd never seen were marked with cryptic symbols: skulls, crosses, a crescent moon. At its center, a single point glowed with red ink, labeled Isla de los Perdidos, the Lost Island. Her pirate heart surged. Treasure maps were the stuff of legend, promising riches that could make a captain untouchable. But Diego's voice cut through her greed like a cannon blast. "This map is cursed," he said, his words heavy as an anchor. "Every soul who sought its treasure has drowned in blood. Your father knew that. And so did your mother, Mariana." The name struck Alara like a rogue wave. Mariana. Her mother, lost to the sea when Alara was barely old enough to walk. The map trembled in her hands as Diego's words sank in. "This map was your father's," he continued, his voice cracking like old timber. "He found it years ago in a wreck off Hispaniola. Thought it would make him rich. Instead, it brought death, betrayal by his own crew, men who sold their souls for a glimpse of that red mark." Alara's throat went dry. Her father, Captain Elias, had died in a mutiny, his ship burned to the waterline. She'd always thought it was bad luck. Now, staring at the map's cursed lines, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the sea air. "You knew him," she said, not a question but a realization. Diego nodded. "I sailed with him. And I swore to protect this map until someone worthy could claim it. Someone like you." Before Alara could process the weight of his words, a shout from above shattered the moment. "Captain. They're signaling." It was Black Jack, his voice thick with panic. Alara stuffed the map into her coat and climbed to the deck, where the crew was gathered, their faces pale as sailcloth. The enemy ships were close now, their flags visible, black with a red serpent coiled around a dagger. Not Navy. Not Calico Jack's men. These were the Crimson Vipers, a pirate crew so ruthless they made Alara's band look like choir boys. And they were signaling for surrender, their cannons primed and ready. Tobin grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "What's got you sneaking below deck, Captain? Got a treasure you're not sharing?" His voice was loud enough for the crew to hear, and murmurs rippled through them like waves against a hull. One eye spat over the rail, his single eye glinting with mistrust. "Heard you talking down there." Sounded like an old man's voice. "You hiding something that's bringing those vipers down on us?" Alara's heart pounded like a war drum. The map burned against her chest, its secrets a weight heavier than any gold. She could lie, but lies wouldn't outrun cannons or silence a crew teetering on mutiny. "I was checking the powder stores," she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her gut. "Unless you want to fight those vipers with harsh words, I suggest you man the guns." The crew hesitated, torn between loyalty and doubt, but the sight of the approaching ships forced their hands. They scattered to their stations, but Tobin lingered, his scarred face twisted with suspicion. "You're playing a dangerous game, Alara," he whispered. "Whatever you're hiding, it better be worth our lives." As the Black Sparrow veered toward the reefs, Alara's mind raced. The map was her father's legacy, a path to riches or ruin. But Diego's warning echoed, *cursed star. Was it worth risking her crew, her ship, her life? The Vipers were closing, their cannons roaring as a warning shot tore through the water, spraying the deck with icy mist. Alara gripped the helm, her eyes locked on the reefs ahead. She could lose them there, but one wrong move would rip her ship apart. And then there was Diego hidden below, a man who claimed to know her parents, who held a map that could rewrite her destiny, or end it. The crew's eyes were on her now, waiting for a command that could save or damn them. She thought of her father, betrayed by those he trusted. She thought of her mother, Mariana, whose name Diego spoke with reverence. And she thought of the choice she'd made to hide him, a choice that now felt like a noose tightening around her neck. "Hard to starboard," she shouted, steering for the reefs. The crew obeyed, but the tension was thicker than the fog rolling in. Tobin's gaze lingered, a promise of trouble if they survived the chase. And then, from below, a sound that stopped her heart, a cough, faint but unmistakable, echoing from the hold. The crew froze, heads turning toward the hatch. One eye's hand went to his cutlass, and Tobin's smile was cold as a shark's. "Sounds like we've got a stowaway, Captain," he said, his voice loud enough to carry over the wind. "Care to explain before we gut him and whatever secret you're keeping?" The Viper's cannons roared again, closer now, and the Black Sparrow shuddered as a shot grazed the stern. Alara's blood turned to ice. The map, Diego, her crew's trust, everything was unraveling, and the cursed treasure was only the beginning. The Black Sparrow screamed through the Caribbean reefs, its hull grazing coral that snapped like brittle bones beneath the waves. Alara's hands gripped the helm, her knuckles pale as the dawn sky, her green eyes locked on the jagged maze ahead. Behind them, the Crimson Viper ships loomed like twin specters, their red serpent flags snapping in the wind, cannons flashing with murderous intent. The air was thick with spray and gunpowder, the deck vibrating with each near miss that sent splinters flying like shrapnel. Below, in the smuggler's nook, Diego and his cursed map were a secret heavier than the gold stashed in the hold. But the real storm wasn't the Vipers, it was the crew, their eyes burning with suspicion as Tobin's accusation of a stowaway hung like a drawn cutlass. Elara had one chance to outrun the pursuit, save Diego and keep her command. One wrong move and the sea would claim them all. The reefs were a death trap, their jagged teeth hidden just beneath the surface, but Elara knew these waters like a shark knew blood. "Hold fast," she bellowed, her voice cutting through the roar of waves and cannon fire. The crew scrambled, hauling ropes and trimming sails, but their movements were sluggish, poisoned by doubt. Tobin stood by the mainmast, his scarred face a mask of barely contained rage. "You heard it, lads," he growled loud enough for all to hear. "A stowaway. Captain's hiding something and now we're running from Vipers for it." One Eye and Black Jack exchanged glances, their hands twitching toward their blades. Mutiny was a spark away, and Elara felt it like a noose tightening around her throat. She spun the helm, banking the Black Sparrow through a narrow channel, coral scraping the hull with a sound like a dying scream. A Viper cannonball tore through the mizzen sail, leaving it in tatters, but Elara didn't flinch. She couldn't, not with the map's weight in her coat, its red-inked promise of Isla de los Perdidos burning against her chest. Diego's words echoed, "Asterisk your father's map. Cursed." Asterisk it was her legacy tied to her parents' ghosts, but it was also a beacon drawing death closer. She needed answers and she needed them now. Leaving the helm to Black Jack, she slipped below, her boots thudding against the ladder as another cannon shot rocked the ship. In the hold, Diego was slumped in the nook, his face gray as ash, the satchel still clutched like a lifeline. The lantern swung wildly, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. "Talk, old man," Elara hissed, her dagger glinting in the dim light. "The Vipers know you're here. What? And don't feed me riddles about my parents." Diego's eyes, fever-bright, met hers with a fire that belied his frailty. "The map, Nina," he rasped. "It's not just treasure. It's power. The Lost Island holds a cache, gold, yes, but also secrets that could sink empires. Your father died to keep it from men like the Vipers." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "I was his navigator. His friend. Swore to protect it until I found you." Elara's heart lurched, the ship's groans mirroring her own. "Me? Why me?" Diego's hand gripped hers, cold but steady. "Because you're Elias's daughter. Because you've got Mariana's fire. The map chooses its keeper and it's chosen you. But beware, its curse is betrayal. Trust no one." His words hit like a squall and then he added, softer, "I sailed with them both, Elara. Your mother didn't die at sea. She's alive, hiding, waiting for you to finish what they started." The revelation was a thunderclap, shaking her to her core. Her mother alive? It was impossible, a lie, or a truth that could rewrite her life. A crash above snapped her back. The Vipers were closing, their shouts carrying over the waves. Elara climbed to the deck, her mind reeling. The crew was fraying, their eyes darting between her and the hold. Tobin stepped forward, his cutlass half-drawn. "Time's up, Captain. Show us the stowaway or we'll find him ourselves." The Vipers fired again, a shot splintering the rail inches from One Eye, who cursed and drew his blade. Elara's choice loomed like a reef in her path: reveal Diego and the map, risking betrayal, or keep silent and face mutiny. Her father's fate, betrayed by his crew, flashed in her mind. She thought of her mother, maybe alive, waiting. And she thought of the map, its promise of power and its curse of blood. "Enough!" Elara roared, her voice louder than the cannons. "There's no stowaway. You want to fight me, Tobin? Do it after we lose the Vipers. Or are you so keen to die?" The crew hesitated, torn between fear and loyalty. Tobin's eyes narrowed, but another Viper shot, closer, shredding rigging, forced his hand. "To the guns!" he barked, and the crew obeyed for now. Elara steered for a hidden channel, one her father had taught her, its entrance masked by a rock formation shaped like a skull. The map's symbols flashed in her mind: skulls, crosses, a crescent moon. Was this channel part of its path? As the Black Sparrow slipped into the channel, the Vipers faltered, their larger ships unable to follow. But the victory was fleeting. A creak from the hold made Elara's blood freeze. Diego had moved or been found. Tobin's head whipped toward the sound, his smile cold as a shark's fin. "Got you now, Captain," he muttered, starting for the hatch. Elara's hand went to her dagger, her heart pounding like a drum of war. The map's curse was waking, betrayal, just as Diego warned. She could fight Tobin, reveal Diego, or risk everything to protect the secret that tied her to her parents. The vipers were behind, the reefs around, and mutiny below. The true test wasn't the chase, it was whether she could trust her own heart. The Black Sparrow limped through the dawn, its hull scarred but unbroken, the reefs a fading shadow behind it. Ilara stood at the helm, her face stung by salt and spray, her green eyes heavy with the weight of the night's choices. The Crimson Viper's ships had vanished, lost in the labyrinth of coral, but the victory felt hollow. Below deck, Diego's secret, the cursed map to Isla de los Perdidos, burned in her coat, its promise of her parents' legacy warring with its threat of betrayal. Tobin's mutinous glare lingered like a storm cloud, the crew's trust fraying like old rope. The map had led them to safety, but its true test was yet to come, and Ilara's heart pounded like a cannon as she steered toward an island barely visible on the horizon, its silhouette jagged as a broken blade. She'd barely escaped the hold's confrontation. Tobin had reached the hatch, his cutlass drawn, ready to drag Diego into the open, but Ilara's quick lie, a crate had shifted, nothing more, bought her time. The crew, distracted by the Viper's retreat, had returned to their posts, but suspicion clung to them like damp rot. Diego's words echoed in her mind, *, your mother's alive. The map chooses its keeper. *, if he was right, Isla de los Perdidos held more than gold. It held answers, a chance to find Mariana, the mother she'd thought lost to the sea. But the curse loomed, and as the island grew closer, its cliffs glowing red in the sunrise, Ilara felt the weight of every choice that had brought her here. The Black Sparrow anchored in a cove, its waters so clear she could see fish darting like silver coins below. The crew, weary but greedy, eyed the island's cliffs, whispering of treasure. Ilara led a small party ashore. Diego, still weak but walking, Tobin, whose silence was sharper than his blade, and Black Jack, loyal but wary. The map guided them through tangled vines and jagged rocks, its symbols, skulls, crosses, a crescent moon, etched into the landscape like a warning. Diego's steps were unsteady, his bloodied coat a reminder of the cost, but his eyes burned with purpose. "It's here," he whispered, pointing to a cave mouth hidden behind a waterfall, its roar like the sea's own heartbeat. Inside, the air was cold, the walls slick with moss and secrets. Ilara's lantern cast flickering shadows, revealing carvings that matched the map's cryptic marks. At the cave's heart, a stone altar stood, its surface etched with a serpent coiled around a dagger, the same symbol as the Viper's flag. Ilara's blood turned to ice. "This isn't just treasure," she said, her voice echoing. "It's a trap." Diego nodded, his face grim. "The map leads to power, Nina, but not the kind you think. No gold. No jewels. Documents, letters, ledgers, proof that the Crimson Vipers and their masters, corrupt governors, have bled these seas dry for decades. Your father died to protect this truth. Your mother hid to keep it safe." The revelation hit Ilara like a broadside. No riches but a weapon, evidence that could topple empires, free ports from tyranny, and expose the Viper's lords. She unrolled the map, finding a hidden fold with a waxed packet. Inside were papers, brittle but damning, names, dates, deals signed in blood. Her parents' names were there, Elias and Mariana, linked to a rebellion against the Viper's masters. Diego's voice softened. "Mariana's alive, Ilara. Hiding in Port Royal, waiting for someone to finish this fight. You're that someone." Tears stung her eyes, not for gold but for the family she might reclaim. But the moment shattered. Tobin, silent until now, drew his cutlass, his face twisted with greed and betrayal. "No treasure?" he snarled. "You dragged us through hell for papers? I'll take the map, Captain, and sell it to the Vipers myself." Black Jack hesitated, torn, but the crew's murmurs behind him showed their loyalty wavering. Ilara's hand went to her dagger, her heart racing like a storm-driven gale. The map's curse, betrayal, had found her just as it had her father. "Stand down, Tobin," she said, her voice iron. "This isn't about gold. It's about justice. My parents' fight. Our fight." Tobin laughed, cold as a winter squall. "Your fight, maybe. Mine's for coin." The cave erupted in chaos. Tobin lunged, his blade flashing, but Ilara was faster, parrying with her dagger, her movements honed by years at sea. Black Jack tackled One Eye, who'd drawn on her, and Diego, frail but fierce, swung a rock at Tobin's knee, dropping him. The crew froze, blades half raised, as Ilara stood over Tobin, her dagger at his throat. "You want to betray me?" she said, her voice carrying the weight of her father's ghost. "Then you betray everyone these bastards have crushed. Choose now." Her eyes locked on the crew, and something in her fire, Mariana's fire, shifted the tide. Black Jack stepped to her side, then another and another. Tobin, defeated, dropped his blade, his mutiny drowned in their loyalty. They emerged from the cave, the packet of documents safe, the map's curse broken by Alara's choice to fight for justice over greed. Diego, leaning on her, smiled faintly. "You're your mother's daughter?" he said. "Find her. Finish this." The Black Sparrow sailed for Port Royal, its crew united, their eyes on a new horizon, not gold but freedom. Alara stood at the helm, the wind in her hair, her heart full of a hope she hadn't felt since she was a child. The treasure wasn't gold, it was truth, and it was hers to wield. If you were Alara, would you have fought for justice or taken the gold you thought was waiting? Tell me in the comments, I need to know what you'd choose. This tale of courage and truth is just the beginning, so hit that subscribe button and click the video on your screen for more stories that'll keep you hooked. The Black Sparrow sailed on, carrying Alara toward her mother and a legacy that would change the seas forever.